welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. And this is an interview with Richard Raffin. As soon as here we go, get his name, I'm going to spotlight him. He's spotlighted for everybody, so the only person you're going to see is Richard. And hold your questions and your questions until after he tells a little bit about his story, and then we'll go from there. Richard, thanks for joining us, and it's all yours, buddy.
Right, yes. Well, you said start with a brief history. So I took up, I was never a hobby turner, so I took it up as a kind of sea change. And I was looking for something different to do I had been selling wines in London, running a number of stores, and I thought I needed to be manufacturing something, making something. And my sister was a potter, a stoneware potter at the time, and we were discussing what I might do. I didn't want to do clay because it's far too messy. And she said, "Oh, you could go to Douglas Hart and learn wood turning." And I said, "Yep, I'll do that." Not really knowing anything about the tools or turning, other than involved a lathe and tools with long handles. And I'd seen one for about 5 minutes, I don't know, 5-6 years previously, and that was it. But anyway, I went to approach Douglas Hart, who wasn't that keen on taking any kind of apprentice at the time, and I looked around elsewhere. And in 1970, this was, or late 69, there really wasn't anywhere to go and learn. There were a couple of people who would take you on for a weekend and purport to teach you everything you needed to know. I was offered a 5-year apprenticeship, and at the time I was 26, so I didn't really fancy a 5-year apprenticeship, having been earning quite a bit of money in London. Anyway, I went back to Douglas, persuaded him to take me on for a fee, and the arrangement was that I'd pay him and he would keep everything I made, and I'd be there for a year. And after about 4 months, we found that he didn't really want to find any more outlets for what I was making, because he knew that when I went, he'd then have to find somebody else to make the stuff. So anyway, I launched in on about the 4th of January 1970, and started a new career, really without knowing anything about the craft at all, but thinking that if I didn't take to it, then I could go and do something else. And in fact, I was offered my old job back about 2 months later. My mother got the phone call, and she never told me until years later. But by that time, I was enjoying the craft, and I was kind of well stuck in, and beginning to accumulate a bit of stock, which come May in 1970, I went on the road with it, and or maybe it was June, and went looking for orders, which I got. And I only went out selling twice, and thereafter people came to me. And in the 1970s, there was no competition from wood turners. So that was wonderful for me. Forgot to mention, I suppose I was in Devon in England at the time, and I just built up stock and went from there. Now, I don't really have anything which I made very much at that time, rather than one plate, which I forgot to bring with me. I'm surrounded by bowls, which I can show you if we want to talk about bowl shapes. I can talk about that a bit later. I set out to make boxes, and I soon realized how difficult those were, little ring boxes and things. And I ended up I was trying to make salad sets of one big bowl with 6 or 8 around it. I wasn't very good, so that produced a number of one-offs. And at the time, if you went into a small gallery, they expected some kind of sales rep to go in with a catalogue, and they can order from the catalogue. And I did print a catalogue, which was never actually much use. Because having got my boxes of one-off bowls, I I found that I could create a market for one-off bowls, and people quite like to have them. So that got me going there, and the cash was flowing fairly quickly. And I've been a self-supporting wood turner ever since. Initially, I think for the first year, my income dived 90%, and there wasn't very much. Well, I owned everything, which helped. I owned a house, yes, I owned everything at the age of 26, and the and that made life a lot easier. I was also single, which also probably made it a lot easier. I didn't have any more financial support, but I found you can live on very little if you have to. And I was just turning kind of 12, 14 hours a day, and away I went. And I was making just bowls, where is it? Probably rather like this one here. This was made much later as a demo, but they were very similar to that. I made, it was in the days of screws, screw faceplates or faceplates. And so plates, this is one from much later, but they were made on screws. So there's a center hole, which was filled. Doesn't look too bad. I've got a much earlier one here. This was made in 73, bit of genuine Cuban mahogany, which came from an old furniture store. And there were a couple of, can I focus in on it? Yeah, you can see the two screw holes there and there. And they got filled with plastic wood. And in England at the time, Roll Plug had a number of different plastic woods, so you could match almost anything. And that was pretty much how I held bowls for the first 10 years. And the chucks didn't really start coming along until the early 80s. I think the first useful wood turning chuck came from Craft Supplies in the US, in Britain, which was a spigot chuck. And that was in 1989. And after that, I think I just made bowls to order mostly. Now, is that enough of? I think that's enough of an introduction. I'd rather get on the questions, and then I think that'll probably produce more information and follow what you're interested in.
Okay, in the chat we have Mike Bracken. You have the first question. Go ahead.
Okay, you often use a flat scraper for finished cuts on your bowls. How do you sharpen your scrapers, and what's the technique that you use for the smooth finish on when you're using scrapers?
Well, I used almost everything straight off an 80 grit CBN wheel, or it used to be. This is refinement. It used to be a 60 grit wheel, and I suppose with a fairly gentle touch, light touch. There wasn't much of a burr. I've got one here actually. This is the first thing, probably one of the first things I ever made, which is a tool handle. But this is a current was it 35 mil scraper, I think. It's about an inch and a half, and yeah, mostly with a kind of 45-degree bevel. That's a bit steeper at the moment, but my general approach to sharpening has always been to get a 45-degree bevel on it, and then when I was grinding on a 6-inch wheel, 6-inch friable wheel soon became a 5-inch wheel. I discovered that you did not want a bevel straight off the wheel because it was far too fragile on the edge. So I would have what I think now is generally regarded as a kind of 60-40 grind, only mine was probably, it would be something like that. So I'd have at least, where are we? At least the kind of 1/8 of an inch of single bevel, and underneath my tools generally look appalling if you're after a single facet, and they'll be all over the place. But the important bit is the first 1/8 of an inch. So that just comes straight off for almost always just straight off the 80 80 grit wheel. I did for a time have a 180 grit, and it just slowed everything down a bit as far as I was concerned. And I did a workshop once in Olympia, up in Olympia in Washington State, isn't it? And they had 180 and 80 grit wheels, and I really couldn't tell the difference between the age of the pair of them. So I think most professionals seem to come off an 80 grit wheel, and everybody else is talking about wheels I've never heard of, really, or I've heard of them but never used them, much finer ones. If I want if I'm working really hard timber, which would be African blackwood, maybe cocobolo. I haven't worked that for years, but then I would hone the edge, take the top off, maybe a couple of brushes up, but no burr is the main thing on very hard timbers. Does that more or less cover it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
he's got a few more parts to his question. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, you want to let Mike Nathel go? I'll just use those others as we need to fill in.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, Mike Nathel, you're up then.
Yeah, Richard, thank you for doing this. I noticed on your YouTube videos, you frequently seem to use a spindle gouge when you're turning bowls. I was wondering about the pros and cons and why you ended up in that direction.
Well, the main pro to me is it's a less expensive tool, and than a bowl gouge. I also found I only really use it on the outside to rough down bowls.
Okay.
I'm on a small lathe these days. I used to have a VL1 300, but I've not often turned stuff much more than a foot diameter. My market didn't want stuff larger than. Yes, it's quite difficult to sell a large bowl. I'm trying to say in Australia. When you're working close to the rest, the half-inch gouge, it's an inexpensive tool compared to a bowl gouge one. What I used to use was a 9/16 half. It looks like a spindle gouge, and 9/16. I think Henry Taylor actually used to make it in the Raffin range of tools, signature tools. I'm not sure if they still do, but that I found took wood off very fast. Now the other reason I gave up using the bowl gouges was that I found that with the early deep fluted bowl gouges, were the high speed ones, which came out in about 1978, 79. When I had my hand over the flute to keep the shavings out of the way, the shavings would jam up in the flute to such an extent that I had a dental tool to prise them out, which wasn't the case with the more open flutes. You don't have that problem. So that's where I was coming from on that one. It's still the same gouge I'm using now, which is the Henry Taylor, the super flute shape, which is the U shape. And that's it. On the inside, I hollow bowls. I've done a series of videos you've probably seen with various forms of spindle gouges, really to antagonize people who think you should never use a spindle gouge on bowls. So, because it's really, we tend to say it's either superstition or ignorance. I'm not sure which, but all that comes from people using the deep fluted bowl gouge, deep fluted spindle roughing gouges, which used to be sold as roughing gouges. So if you're new to the craft, you'd assume that a roughing gouge is what you need for everything. But I was told years ago that Sorby's and Henry Taylor's had drawers full of broken spindle gouges or spindle roughing gouges, which had been used to attack enormous lumps of, bowl blanks and things like that. So, and I think that's where the myth comes from.
So what bevel angles do you use on the spindle versus the bowl gouge?
Generally, well, on the spindle gouges I'm using for spindle turning, they'll be nearer 30 degrees. But most of my stuff just gets the basic 45,
Okay.
which over the years gets a bit steeper until I can't stand it any longer. Then I grind it back again
Mhm.
and start again. I'm usually in a hurry, so no, making a living at it. So I suppose I was, and I never had formal instruction with any of these things, so I just tend to use what I found works.
Mhm.
And some of that has become mainstream. So that's, yes, if you need to get into a corner, if you're cutting beads or something like that, then a longer bevel is useful to have. And then on my gouges, I tend to have an asymmetric grind anyway, which just kind of further compounds the problems if you're grinding. It doesn't make it maybe easier to grind, but I find they remove a wood pretty fast when you're hollowing, faster than the symmetrical fingernail grind.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any follow-up questions on that one? No.
Ron, you're muted.
There we go. I'm sorry. Mike Bracken still has a few more parts to his question, but the next person in line is Berkowitz. You have a question about a refiner scraper. Go ahead and ask Richard what you want to ask him.
Muted.
Okay. I noticed on the refiner scraper that you just held up, you've got that asymmetric grind. Do you say it's faster? Are there more advantages to it?
This is my bowl scraper, but
Okay.
you could use it for shear scraping, but it's much easier if I find you've got more connection with the wood if you use a lighter tool. So my shear scraper is an inch by quarter, and again skewed. And I've got one which is this shape, but generally they're a little straighter than that, a little less curved.
But you say the asymmetric grind makes it faster? Other
Oh,
advantages?
that's on a gouge. That's for
Okay.
the gouge. Yeah, you'll see it in, well, yes, you see it in any of my bowl videos. You'll see the asymmetric tool in use. I just find that as you're coming into the bowl, it's the action of the right wing is more like a scraper, and it just takes the wood out really quickly.
Thank you.
Okay, Riney, you're up next. Riney, unmute.
Unmute.
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yep.
sir. Now we can.
Okay. Thanks for being here, Richard. I about 25 years ago, I decided to start teaching wood turning in a high school for boys, a prep school that I was teaching woodworking in. And the problem was that I had very little experience in turning vessels. And as I started looking to teach myself, it was a desert out there. And the only thing I could find was your books and your videotapes. And I want to thank you for that because they kept me a week ahead of my students for about 20 years.
A great way to learn. Great way to learn.
And I've probably worn out about 3 copies of this over the years, which I
Well,
just
that's
kept
what an author likes to hear. So.
So thanks very much. I remember the first time I decided we needed to learn to use that skew chisel to turn beads. And after bloodying my own hands, looking at the pictures in your book, I decided to do it with the boys. And the first reaction I got was, "Is he crazy?" and I was able to say, well, when you master a skill and you demonstrate it, it probably looks crazy in most cases. So thanks for being crazy.
That's well, you can always take them back to the gouge, and it's much safer.
Right. My question is, could you talk a little bit about your diversion into tubes and pots and boats?
Yes, I've got a few up here. If people aren't sure if you can, oh, yes, you can see them. These things up here. Get that one out. The diversion was, I think I first did these in quantity for an exhibition I was always full of spiders and things. I was always interested in trying to get a tube distorted, rather like potters can. I've spent a lot of time around potters during my in the 70s. And I always liked the way they could just throw something and then distort it. And I spent a lot of time trying to do that with end grain pieces. And then it dawned on me that what you need to do is cross grain, and then it's going to warp. So this one, nearer the center, if you can see the grain, no, it doesn't matter. So this is near the pith, and the growth rings are, round. I'm not very good at thinking back to front here. So the growth rings are running around there, and the growth rings are always going to try and straighten themselves out. So these are cut from a thin slither off the end of a log, and then you cut what looks like a centerwork blank, a spindle blank. And when they're turned, or when they're finished, they then dry out. So they distort and go oval. But basically, the nearer the center of the tree, the more they're going to bend. And some of them are, this one has been verdigreed. So that's, you can see the pith was around there. And some of them are very distorted indeed. Almost as well, they're so distorted that they'd fall over. So I'd then have to sand the bottom differently. But these were, I think I was wanting to make some. They're not kind of mainstream stuff, which is easy to sell. And I very rarely, I think I had one big exhibition with a friend, and we sold, I think, only 4 pieces altogether anyway. And they were bought by friends. And so the pieces I have made of those have generally gone with me to the States, to symposiums, and sold there. But I don't know, I can't remember why I went into those now, but I've made probably over 1,000 altogether, I suppose, tubes, and generally sold them in 3s and 5s. And then there are also the kind of pencil pot types. Shorter versions like this, which I quite enjoy making. And they have acrylic on the inside, and they're not sanded generally. They're just straight off the tool, and you have this. This finish is a mix of verdigris and rust, which confuses people who know about metal, and that's again partly why that would be done. Yes, I quite enjoy making them, I must say. But getting rid of them is another matter altogether. Is that roughly where? Yes, have I answered the question at all?
Okay.
How about the pots and the boats?
The boats. Yeah, I did those for a time. These, I'm going to pick either one on. I've only got little ones now. Or there is one big one, but that's elsewhere in the house. But so this is what, about a foot long, and this is wire extracted from some kind of electrical cable, and they're all kind of very fast and loose, cut on a bandsaw, and I did a big fleet of them. But again, I live inland, so they're not really not easy to sell up here. The interesting thing is that a lot of the Vietnamese or people who came over to Australia by boat after the Vietnam War recognize these as shapes, and several have bought them to remind them of their trip, which is yes, it's so they mean something to somebody, but they're not generally the kind of thing. That's again something I really enjoy making, but they're not very commercial in this part of the world. And what was the other bit? There was something out of box.
The pots, the small pots.
Oh, the pots. Sorry, language problem. Yes, the so you mean like these or the oh no, the rounded ones. So these start off basically. No, I had little platforms, didn't I? So these are banks here, so they kind of sit and wobble around like that. This hasn't been finished, or it hasn't got any finish off it yet. It's just a straight little pot for people who might like them like that with oil on it, or more often they get this kind of treatment. So that's another one like that. And I like the way these kind of wobble around, and there's one there, there's one with a few more bits on it. And I think, oh, there's actually a set up on the top too. Want to have a closer look at that? So you tend to go out. So the biggest one would probably be about 4 inches. And I see them as kind of little sculptural groups. These are a bit dusty. Yes, not very good at housekeeping around here. Okay.
Are you done, Rainey?
I'm done. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Right.
Paul Stubbs, you're up next.
You know, let me get these out of the way.
Paul Stubbs, unmute.
Go ahead.
Paul, please unmute.
He's looking for the
Hello.
button.
Okay.
Am I on now?
Yeah, you're on now. Go ahead.
All right, Richard. I really appreciate all your videos. I've only been turning for about 8 years and got a few of your books. And I really appreciate all your videos you put on. It helped me go backwards in hearing about all the great ones and seeing you work. But my other question is, my real question is, how long was Tomislav? How long was his apprenticeship with you? Because you two seem like a carbon copy of each other.
Now, obviously, I think he made contact with me about 4 years ago, something like that. We've kind of lost how it all happened now, but I have quite a few people making contact, asking about running a business, turning a business. So I think I was helping him a bit there, and then he had questions about our basic technique, and I think he basically learned to. He's a joiner by trade, so he would have done a very thorough Croatian, formal training, which you still get in Europe, and so he would have covered some turning with that, I suspect. But otherwise, I think he pretty well learned to turn off my videos. with a bit of
That's
kind of
impressive.
extra support from me talking about it. Yes, we've had a lot of correspondence over the years, and now he's much better than I am with the tools, I think. So
So he never
he's
turned
doing it
with
all
you.
the time. I'm not. I'm turning about 3 days a month. You know, I knock out several videos in an afternoon and then spend a few days editing them.
So you never turn with him one-on-one?
No, entirely off the videos.
That is impressive.
Right. Well,
So
there
you
are a
have
lot
a
of
lot
people
to
who
offer,
claim,
sir.
a lot of people who claim to have learnt to turn off the original turning wood, which is it's almost prehistoric, that video now, because it was made before any of the modern chucks. So it's all faceplate and screws and screw chucks and jam chucks. There were no cold jaws or anything like that around.
Well, one other question I have for you, sir. You have a collection of dividers made for every chuck size. So when you
Yeah.
how do you keep track of them the way you have them stacked up?
By eye. I mean, generally, because I wouldn't be making. I never really did one thing at a time. If I would be doing a batch, so you have the calipers out for that batch. So I would be, if I was making bowls. Well, what have we got here? But making a bowl like this, I would have the calipers for those bowls. So I'd have the big ones for doing the diameter, then the small ones. This was actually made pre the modern chucks. This was made in the early days of the spigot chuck, where this would have been a symmetrical foot gripped on a 3-jaw chuck, 3-jaw engineer's chuck, and then I would have turned this little bit in the middle, which fitted the spigot chuck, which I think that's an inch and a quarter, something like that, or inch and a half. It's yes, it doesn't seem to be either. I think it's normally an inch and a half, and so I would make most of the bowl with that, and then turn this foot when I re-chuck the bowl on the spigot chuck, which gripped around that little bit in the middle. And so it did that for about 4 years in the early 80s. And that was a great advance in chucking at the time. But yes, I've lost my track now.
Another question, sir. You're the first person I saw return a rough turn bowl by gripping the inside, by roughing that scraper groove out.
Yes.
Where did that come from?
Me.
That's what I thought.
So now in the must have been in the mid 80s, I had Vicmark, who were a fairly new company at the time, make me a set of big step jaws. They were 8-inch diameter with 3 steps inside. I no longer have them. I sold them when I was downsizing, but and I found that they were very good for roughing bowls, because I could, when I was roughing bowls out, then I could be fairly fast and loose with the foot size, because I had a jaw into which they would fit on the one chuck. And then to re-chuck them, it just seemed sensible to just to expand the jaws inside, since I had the jaws that large. Before that, in the early days, when I was still turning stuff on screws, on screw faceplates, the 2 screw holes would be aligned along the grain where there's the least movement. If you put the screw holes across the grain, they would not be in the same place in relation to the faceplate holes after they dried. So does that make sense? I made that clear?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So for kind of 10, 12 years, I think the first 10, 12 years of my bowl turning, I'd be rough turning with the 2 screws going in just under 1/2 inch, the number 14 wood screws. They'd be set aside for a couple of years and then go back. I'd flatten them on a belt sander, and the screw holes, the screws would go back into the same holes because there's not that much movement along the grain. So when the chucks came on, that made life a lot easier as a production turner. And safer too, because we weren't gripping them on a 3-jaw chuck. I think probably, in fact, when I think back at it, I was turning a groove on the inside of rough bowls, which I could expand the 3 jaws into. And that was actually better than using the modern chucks, where you have, because it doesn't matter if with a 3-jaw chuck if the inside of the bowl has distorted, because you're only picking it up on 3 points. And it meant that I could then put the groove in when I was rough turning the bowl, whereas now I have to do it after the bowl's walked. That's the internal shoulder.
Okay. Hey, one more question about your shark jaws. I never saw you use the deep, like a deep external grip on it. Do you ever use that for anything?
Well, yes. I mean, if I've got a square bit of end grain, and I'm working well out from the rest, and I'll do that. I'll grip the whole blank goes right back into the chuck. I just thought there'd be a fair number of videos where you see that, but then I usually bring it out at the end. But you won't see it with bowls. Generally, I don't grip the whole length, but I will have a foot going. I'll grip at the top of a foot rather than the bottom of one. Okay. There is a video on how to use those chucks without marking the wood.
I saw it.
Right, so
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, Jim Duxbury, you're up next.
Okay. Well, I got all kinds of questions. Your tubular vase, you depend on warpage. Do you use the trunk of the wood, or is a limb better?
No, you wouldn't use a limb because it doesn't distort.
I thought it would distort.
And there are other things too. You do not want the pith in anything if you can avoid it, really. So with these, see if I've got a more distorted one.
I thought a limb would distort more, a big limb or something.
No, the whole point is that you, I mean, if this is a log,
yeah,
you cut off, if you want a 2-inch diameter tube like this, you cut off a slice 2 inches thick. And then you lay that flat on the saw and cut what look like spindle blanks out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got a spindle blank with the grain running across.
Okay.
And because of that, the wood is going to, you always think this has got more pronounced growth rings. Now, as the wood dries, you can think of these rings trying to straighten themselves out. Therefore, with the pith here, that means as they straighten themselves out, this is going to bend that way.
Yeah. Okay.
So, but if that's a branch and you just drill straight in, it's not going to move much.
Okay.
But it is very likely to split out at the middle.
No, I mean, you use half of a big branch, because one side would be compression, the other side would be tension, and I thought maybe the grain would stress differently or something. I don't know.
I've never had any success that way.
Okay.
But no, generally this seems to be the way. And these raise all kinds of other cutting problems because it's not easy to cut a very small disc with cross grain cleanly.
Yeah.
And then you need a wood which is known to warp, which is the other thing.
Okay.
So oaks are very good for that. But there are some woods which just don't like to, which are just stable and that's it. So they're not ideal for it.
What kind is good? I missed that.
Oak is,
Oh, yeah. Okay.
most of the oaks are good. This is elm. That goes quite well. And you would use, gosh, can't think of the name. You've got some woods which walk very well. It's on the bottom of this bowl. Where are we?
Probably beech or something.
A madrone is what I was
Oh,
trying to
yeah.
think.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's
Mhm.
the same principle. Use that bowl, but that's a burr as well. So this was made in near Boston somewhere in a demo. Remember, so about 30 years ago.
Mhm. Well, yeah.
And same principle again with these little bowls. So with the pith pretty well across the middle.
Yeah.
It's outflowing like that. It's going to that's going to pull the sides down, and if you enclose it, it's going to do much the same. That goes oval, and that's pulled down very slightly, but it tends to pull in, and you control the shape like that.
Very nice. My other question is, you answered part of it. I read Bill Jones's book, The Ivory Turner.
Yes.
Have you heard? And he
I have it here. I have the book here.
Okay, wonderful. I had a great time reading that, and he's quite a guy. But anyway, he uses 3 jaws and 4-jawed chucks at different times. I wondered if you already answered part of that for me. I couldn't figure out why he would use one, and then on other projects he would want to use another one. But I suppose if something's way out of round, a 3-jawed chuck would work much better, right?
I never use a 3-jaw chuck these days. They're just too dangerous with the jaws whirring around. I mean, that's what we had in the 70s, and it was very nice when other chucks came along.
Well, you answered the other part of my question. The first thing he started out was, when you get a chuck, be sure you grind off the edge of the jaws. And
I can tell you, even when they're round, they still do damage. They still do damage.
Especially when you hit it the second time. It really hurts the first time. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Wonderful job.
Okay, Mike Bracken, you can go ahead with the rest of your question.
Okay, thanks, Richard. You have a video that you're doing coring, and my question was, what species do you find are the best, and how do you determine a good log or blank to core out some bowls? And do you still do a lot of coring?
No, well, I don't do a lot of turning. I mean, it's let alone coring. But so that the recent video with the slicer was that's all I've got now. I used to core everything with the McNaughton system, but I had cutters which came in from the headstock side, and my thinking being that I've got the blank mounted on a screw chuck. And then I can peel off one blank, or turn the profile, turn the blank with the foot, and then I can peel that off, put another foot on the bit which is remaining, peel that off, and that's I found pretty efficient for what I wanted to do. I'm nothing like as good at it, and few people are, as Mike Mahoney, who can get heaven knows how many bottles out of a similar bowls out of a similar size blank coming in from the other side. But that was always the way I did, and I just found it faster way of roughing out bowls. The slicer works. I mean, it just gives you a kind of V-shaped one. Selecting wood, I was again, as a production bowl turner, I look for something which works easily. So I was working ash in England, but that was before we worked out how to nest out bowls. These days I'm working claret ash, which is an Australian developed hybrid of ash, of English and American ash. And that works very nicely. I used to use a lot of Tasmanian myrtle, and I don't think I've got that. And we use Tasmanian blackwood. So their woods were going to work fairly easily anyway. And you want something ideally which is fairly straight grained, with the burls and stuff like that. I used to have all kinds of problems trying to get the tool coming right into the center. You didn't really want to break it out because there's a very good chance of it breaking the wrong way. And there are bowls out there where I went through the bottom as I parted off the outer bowl, which left me with a cone with a spiky bit, which would fit back into the hole whence it came. So I would part that off and stick it back in the hole with glue, and you couldn't tell that it had been recently detached. But and I just hope they haven't become detached more recently, you know. But I think generally depending on the roughing system you've got, I think I've never used the one way or the woodcut systems, but I think they do a pretty good job of going right in to the middle and taking a complete round out. I'm not the person to ask on those particular tools. Does that cover that?
You're still up,
Mike,
Mike. Go ahead. You got a couple
your
more.
mic's off.
I'm having, yeah, that covers it. Thank you very much.
All right,
Okay.
you were asking about his finishes.
Yeah, that question comes from Rich Gibbs, who wasn't able to make it. He's asking what are the different finishes that you use, and do you have a specific go-to finish that you use? Want to talk a little bit?
I've got a good quote from Dale Nish on this, which was, Richard makes some of the best bowls with the worst finish. And I've always used a mix of oil and the beeswax. And I found that it works for what I'm making pretty well. It's not a long-lasting finish. I know it's going to, but it provides a very good base for ongoing surfaces. These are, in fact, I don't like high gloss, but this elm would have had oil on it, boiled linseed, and then the beeswax. No, this would have just had oil because it was bent and I couldn't put it back on the lathe. Stuff on the lathe. Stuff on the lathe usually gets oil, and then the beeswax just goes in on top, which is what you normally see on the videos I use. I'm very kind of lax, I suppose you'd say, compared to most people with this. The oil and the wax mixes up as it goes onto the wood, and the surplus wax comes off into a cloth which will be the waxy cloth eventually, and it seems to work very well. Now, what happens is when it gets with a finished piece, which is never going to see water, it then, it's like this one, this madrone one, would have been oiled, and I oiled it yesterday just because it was looking a bit dusty in the grooves, and it's come up beautifully. I think it's just what I kind of like in a piece. It looks vaguely antique and leathery. And I don't know that I've got anything old with a wax finish on it. Most of my pieces are getting used, so this has never been, this hasn't been used for at least 30 years. It's about 45 years old. And that again had a little bit of a rub with boiled linseed yesterday, which has brought it up okay. It's a bit shiny for me now, but that's a piece of holly, which I made in England in 1980. And so I think it's one of the first pieces where I had one of my early green turn pieces, and it had a split. Just see the remnants of the split. Put some more light on it. Yeah, so there's a little kind of split there, and I found that with bowls like that, the maximum dimensions of a bowl generally yield maximum price. Therefore, I wanted to keep the maximum dimensions, and I used to cut in on the defect and kind of shape it. So I have a bowl like that. So that was an arty bowl from 1980. I made a lot of those. I had about 3 tons of holly at the time, just before I moved to Australia, and I needed to get through it. So I made hundreds of these kinds of bowls, all sold quite well. A modern version of that is this one, but this is on finishing. Now this bowl gets a lot of heavy use, and hasn't been used for a day. But it's had grapes and things in it recently. And I find that my finish comes off when you wash it. So hot water and detergent will take it off. And then in use, bowls tend to end up, there's another one, a piece of Tasmanian blackwood, which is like koa, very similar. And this gets a lot of heavy use, this bowl. Never gets another finish on it, just gets washed up. And there's another one. Made this one on the Norwegian wood turning cruise about 10 years ago. And I've been using it. I use this a lot. And it's got 3 little feet on it so that it sits all right. Where are we? There. So and 3 little feet just mean that they're grubby. So they kind of get warm. So that will never actually wobble around, always sits fairly firmly, but use that for salad a lot. And finished ones, so this is a bowl, which is a box rather, which has actually no attention at all for probably 20 years. And so that'll be a straight beeswax, oil and beeswax finish, maybe just beeswax. But it would polish up quite nicely, fairly quickly, like the other bowls. I have tried a few others. I tried the Osmo, the German stuff, which is just a little bit shiny for me, but I've friends who use it a lot for on utilitarian stuff. So I think I'd probably be going for that if I was using anything commercial. But you need to use a lot of that by the feel of it. It seems to go off quickly. I had some, but it congealed. I wasn't using enough to warrant getting a whole can. It's very expensive.
So the linseed and the beeswax is your go-to and gets you the best
that's my
penetration?
go-to. Yeah, and failing that, I recently tried rice bran oil. I think it was. I couldn't get boiled linseed from the normal source that day, or they'd run out or something. And so I just went down to the supermarket and I just thought I'd try the rice bran. That doesn't dry yes, it doesn't dry. So, but mixed in with the oil, it stays on long. It doesn't actually come off sticky. It just makes a nice kind of finish, and it doesn't act as a sealer. That's the real thing. But it brings out the grain, and then the wax goes in on top to act as stops the oil coming out on the shelf life when it's in a retail situation. But if it's going straight in to use a bowl, then I would probably just oil it or wash it up and just use it. I always find it quite distressing that not all these bowls people are making don't seem to get used, or a lot of them don't. And I see finishes going on which make them unusable, which seems quite sad, really.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, I got a couple of questions for you, Richard. First of all, I know you're in Australia now. Where are you originally from, and what made you go to Australia, of all places?
I mean, of all places.
No, I mean it's not just a bus ride away. It's a hop, skip, and a jump.
What makes you live in the northeast of all places, right? Yeah, no, I've got a Australian grandfather on one side, so I'm a kind of Anglo-Australian family. So that's one reason. I was born in Devon in England during the war, and we moved over to Australia where my father had been educated. He was actually the grandparents moved around a lot, and they were just constantly going between Australia, Germany, and Scotland. And my grandfather was at a German university as a doctor. I don't know quite doing what. We've never discovered. So I've got that kind of gene which keeps me going around the world.
Okay.
I originally I sort of emigrating just because I got fed up with the class system in Britain as much as anything. And coming from my background, I didn't really fit in anywhere. I was kind of, I suppose, defined as the kind of educated upper middle classes doing a blue collar job, and the people, because all the people I went to school with really can't cope with that, especially if you're actually making a living at it. If you're able to afford to do it as a kind of dilettante, then that's acceptable. But anyway, so for those kinds of reasons, I thought I'd leave. And also, my father was a painter, a portrait painter, and we painted he painted landscapes. And I was brought up with those in England, so I spent 4 years in Australia in the late 40s, and then my father died in 1950, and my mother took us back to England, which is why I was brought up in England. And otherwise, I'd probably been brought up in Australia and wanted to go back to England. Who knows? But I found when I thought of going to New Zealand, and I went over there in 1975 to have a look, and reckoned I wouldn't be able to earn a living as a turner there that easily. That's probably the wrong decision. I think I probably could. But then I wasn't aware that I had this huge family clan in Australia, but so I came over here for a couple of weeks on that trip and met a huge family, and I liked the energy of the place anyway, so I moved over here. I came as a craftsman in residence at a craft centre just south of Sydney in 1977, and then moved over here in 82. And that was, it's been a good move.
Yeah, I know a few people that are from Australia, and one of them was a supervisor for a company I worked for, and she'd go back home once a year, and she'd always bring back pictures with her. And I mean, it's a beautiful country from what I can see. But I just wondered what made you decide to leave your home country to go there. But
Yes,
family will do that.
family will do that, and it's yes, and there's also that thing of, I was give me a child at the age of 7, they're mine for life. So I was living in Sydney from the age of 4 to 7,
Okay.
or thereabouts, and it's just just feel more comfortable here. And I remember flying in the first time thinking, yep, I'm going to enjoy it down here. And that's looking at it from the sky and the barren parts of northern Queensland.
I'll be darned.
Yeah, you need to. I mean, America. I think we're slightly larger than continental America.
Yes, you are.
We have a lot of landscape and
Yeah,
stuff.
it's a lot. Actually, when this meeting all started to get organized, that's when I started doing a little bit of research. I didn't realize Australia was as big as it is.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys got 4 time zones just like us, and I'm like, whoa,
Yes. Yeah.
The other thing is Tomislav. He uses the step jaws like you do on quite a few of your videos. And in his videos, he said you're the one that came up with that idea for VicMark. Is that true?
Well, I asked VicMark to make some, and then they went into production with them a bit later. I never really connected the two events, but I've never had any royalties off them or anything like that. So.
I was going to say that's a shame if it was your
possibly
idea.
not. It's a very small market. You're never going to be, or few people, I think, will be wealthy from selling a tool, a gizmo.
Yeah, that's true. I noticed on most of your videos now you're using a VicMark. Is it a 150, I believe?
Yep, that's all I've got. Yep.
Okay. What was your first lathe?
My first lathe was the Coronet Major, which I bought because there's a picture of this guy standing turning a tabletop. And I thought, that's the lathe for me. I can do almost anything on this lathe. And it proved really to be a heap of junk. It was just an appalling machine. I broke. I mean, admittedly, I was a beginner and without too much instruction, but I went through 3 faceplates. They just broke on me. I went through half a dozen bearings, I think, in about 4 months. They were phosphor bronze, and you tightened them up. So it was very good. It was adequate it was good for spindle turning, but absolutely useless for any face work. There was always a bit of play. And so I'd been advised not to get it, but it looked as though it was it was a universal machine. I had a saw bench with it and a sander. And I think about 3 weeks after I had it, I realized the mistake, and I ordered a Harrison Union Graduate. And that in those days, I can remember I was quoted about £92 for it. And when it arrived 4 months later, 3-4 months later, it was £109. So it had increased 10% in the cost. And that was when I just get a good machine like that. Just never look back. It was just a wonderful machine. And I got a short bed because it looked as though I could do bowls on that from the right-hand side, where it was designed to be, had a funny kind of tailstock, which came up as a U, which wasn't that accurate, but it was fine for doing center work, where you don't need complete accuracy. But if you've got a piece of wood in a chuck, then the center has to be dead accurate. So, but that did me I had 3 in the end. I had a long bed one for doing center work up to about, I think it did 4 feet. And I had the 2 bowl lathes, one really as backup. They did me until the mid 80s, I think. So I had them for about 15 years. And then I went over to Woodfast, which was a more accurate machine with accurate tail centers. And at that time, we were still on. There was no variable speed available, and that came in the late 80s, early 90s, and then if you had trouble with that, then I transferred from there to Vicmark. Partly that was an issue where I was even on a poster for Woodfast for a time, saying, I changed to Woodfast, why don't you? But I had problems with my 3 Woodfast electronic variable speeds at the time, same which everybody seemed to be having. And they did very little to help me out of the problem. And at the same time, Vicmark offered me a lathe to try out and they had I don't know how it worked now. They had a variable speed, a kind of Reeves drive for the split pulleys. And so I used that for about 5 years, and then they got the electronic variable speed together, and I've had those machines ever since. But they only gave me the first one. I had to buy the others.
Glenn Lucas has got about a dozen of those in his new studio.
Yeah, I'm sure he paid for some of those.
Yeah, I'm sure he did too. Obviously, you're still turning. Do you still sell some of your products in galleries or anything yet?
No, there's the retail scene or the gallery scene here is almost non-existent for wood. We have a very good wood gallery about 20 miles out of town here, and I used to supply all those their bowls in the 90s, and then I don't know what happened. They just decided to take the gallery in a slightly different direction or something. Anyway, I stopped supplying them, or they stopped ordering about the time I was ready to do less anyway. So I was, I'm 81 now, so I would have been kind of 61 then. I was happy to kind of do much less turning, and I was doing. Yes, no, I wasn't hungry enough, should we say. So, and I still had I had a very good gallery in Sydney, and he used to take everything. I've never done consignment, so as a general thing, and the gallery in Sydney, he would order X number of dollars worth, and I would take it up, and he'd just give me a check on the spot and check the order later. So it was a wonderful arrangement. And it's always amazing that the galleries don't seem to grasp that if they pay you on time or on delivery, they're likely to get better service than the guy who messes you around for 3 or 4 months, But I think generally, I've always dealt with people who pay on time or on delivery. And so he did me then for until the global financial crisis. And then after that, there weren't many people traveling, and we just weren't selling anything. The galleries I remember he rang up one time and said he used to meet his monthly expenses in 3 or 4 days, and he wasn't meeting them in 3 weeks. And he was just having to close the galleries. But that time we're making almost entirely stuff like this is one which went on the YouTube a couple of weeks ago, I think it was. Fairly heavy bowls like that, or even more, were always red. This is one from the early 90s, and that was very much what I think we were all making in Sydney market then, and always felt the reason people bought these heavy bowls was because they couldn't be damaged in checked bags. Whereas if you've got a thin bowl, very difficult to get home if you're a foreigner. And so that was that was what the market demanded, and that was what I was delighted to make, but in quantity. And with that, but I haven't been able to sell a kind of thin bowl, or the market hasn't been doing that since the mid-80s. This is one from this little hue and pine bowl. It was very typical as I was making in the 80s. And suddenly it was extraordinary. Suddenly the market just dropped totally away and people only bought the heavy Jarrah ones.
Huh.
That was universal in the Sydney market. And there were about 5 of us making those kinds of bowls.
Okay,
So
Jim
market
and
forces.
I'm sorry. Okay, Jim and Kathy Meyer, they have a question up. You go ahead, unmute and talk to Richard.
Richard, thank you. I wonder if there's any place for microcrystalline wax in wood turning.
I don't know anything about it.
All right. That's too bad
it sounds as if it makes things very shiny and slippery.
Well, that's what they use in Renaissance wax.
Ah, right. Yeah,
But,
I tend to stick with what I've always used, and it doesn't seem to slow up sales. So, that's where I've come from.
What's your ratio of beeswax to oil linseed oil?
Random would be the word.
Okay.
It's the oil time kind of gets slopped on, and then I run the wax over the top, and it builds up a kind of sticky layer, and then the two kind of mix in together. And those of you who've seen many of the videos know there's a kind of running joke with the sock, which is some of you will have seen several socks now, but they're very impregnated with wax and oil, and you can often, on a harder wood, you'd only need to apply the sock to get a good finish.
Okay.
And it'll look pretty good for 2 or 3 years, but if you like it shiny, then you just have to apply a bit more
Sure.
to it. And somewhere I've on all my bowls I put a label which says you hand wash this and you can oil it and occasionally, but if you look after it, it'll outlast us all.
But you don't mix the two together. You put one on after the other.
No, not deliberately. No, off the lathe. No, it just goes on, and sometimes the wax goes on, and then if it's not spreading as fast as I'd like, then I'll slop some oil on. It's pretty casual, but
Okay.
it seems to work.
Thank you. I'll unmute. I'll mute again.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a question from Rich Gibbs that he sent in. Do you ever use a carbide tool? And if you do, where do you use the carbide as opposed to your traditional high-speed tools?
No, I have used carbide in when I've tried them out in workshops, and I've never found one I'd want to have anything more than kind of 10 seconds experience with, really. And they seem extremely expensive for what they are to me, and they don't stay sharp as long as people think. I mean, they hold some sort of an edge, so they're good for kind of roughing down, I suppose. But no, I think the traditional tools are very difficult to beat. That's why they're traditional, isn't it?
Very good, thank you.
I don't think I've ever seen a video that you've done that hasn't been old school. You don't use any of the modern technologies, vacuum chucking and all that other garbage.
Well, now the reason I didn't vacuum chuck, I have had one, is that most of the Jarrah we were using was full of holes, so the vacuum chucks didn't work. But if I was back in the days of doing stuff like this, which is solid, vacuum chuck's really useful. Yeah, just shove it on and away you go. So I did have one. They are noisy, and that's a downside of them. But it's so fast to put things between centers when you're set up for that. That's yeah. And it might even be quicker to get them on accurately too than onto a vacuum chuck. I can't remember now, but I did mess around with them for a bit.
Yeah. I actually have one, and I very, very seldom ever use it. But
One thing I did find with the vacuum chuck, I had a flat one with, I think it was a commercial one, which had a thin layer of foam on it. And it sucked the bowl on all right, but there was still enough play to make really accurate work a bit trickier. It was much easier to have a catch on than just putting pieces between centers. Well,
that
my
makes sense.
experience.
That makes sense. Okay, do we have any other questions? Anybody?
Gosh, you better have something. I've got 3/4 of an hour to fill, otherwise. So we've got, what's this? Gosh, I was just thinking yes, I'm surprised nobody's asked about about negative rake scrapers, for instance. I was almost guaranteeing a question on negative rake scrapers, or have I silenced everybody through the videos?
Okay, I'm asking. I don't use them. I tried them. I don't care for them. But can you talk about negative rake
well,
scrapers?
Was
Can
that
you
another
go?
question? Yeah. No, well, really, I mean, it's mostly, I think that the negative rake, what's it? I've kind of even got little models ready here, which I think are more or less that shape. But the main crucial thing with them is that they're designed so when you're working here on a flat surface, it's less likely to catch than if you're using the other end. Whereas if you've got that end sticking, the tool is sticking up, then you're likely to have a catch with the wood trying to get through the edge trying to get through the wood. Whereas if you have the tool sticking up at that angle with a negative rake, it's less likely to catch. That's the theory. But mostly I find, so, all you have to do really with the scraper is conventional one, just raise the handle and you've got the negative rake, which is the angle between the surface you're cutting and the top of the tool. And if you're on a curve, I'm trying to find a curve. So you can work, no, how am I going to do this? Yeah, so if I'm in here, I've got to have the tool tilted down when I'm at center. But once I come turning up here, I can actually tilt it up a bit because the angle between this bit up here and the top of the tool is less than a right angle. And so if you can get a curved scraper and get up into that area, and you're safe, which I don't think people always grasp. And the other point is which I was really prepared for. So if you're turning if this is in a box, shall we say, you're in a box lid, and you wanted to cut a cylinder, if you have the tool down too low, now that's a 3/4 inch scraper, I'll do it with the big one. If you've got the tool down too low, when the edge, if the rest rather too low, as the corner of the tool comes in, the bevel is going to shift the tool up and off to this towards center. Whereas if you have the rest high enough, then only the top left edge up here is in contact with the wood, and that way you cut nice and cleanly. Whereas if you turn it the other way around and you've got a negative rake scraper, the corner, which is doing the cutting, never gets to the wood because the two sides are keeping it out.
That makes sense.
The real reason I never use them for doing bowl blanks and stuff like that, for doing boxes. Yeah, Yes. Any kind of questions in that direction?
Chris
There
Cahill,
are usually a lot.
he's got his hand up. Go ahead, Chris.
Right.
Thank you, Richard. It's a pleasure to hear from you. We've seen all your videos and they're remarkable. My question is I'm having a issue with either using a bottom bowl gouge to clear out the bottom right
Going to
angle.
center, yeah.
Would you just rather go from a scraper, come out of the whole bowl with a scraper?
I don't know. Well, it's I've always used scrapers, I suppose. So I tend to cut down the first third, or as far as is comfortable, with a kind of 45-degree bevel. And I can go the whole way with an asymmetric gouge because the right wing is much steeper. And it was designed originally so that I had a 45-degree bevel on the nose of the tool so I could get a good entry cut. And then I go down the side and roll the tool over into the middle. And I could do a shear cut that way. And I only do that now when there's particularly difficult grain to cut, because I find I've got more accuracy with the scraper, and it's really just lack of practice that I don't use the bowl gouge like that now. But you see people like Mike Mahoney or Tomislav probably, they can go all the way down and get a really nice cut right into the middle, no lumps, no dips, and so on. But my bowl scraper is generally this one. It's a slightly tight curve, this one. But generally I have try and cut with a curve just inside, or a radius on the tool just inside the curve I'm trying to cut, slightly tighter. And that way I can relate the curve much more easily to the tool than I could if I had a very tight curve on the end of the tool. So if I'm going across, I've got a lot of half bowls here, so I should be able to find one where I can make that point. Right, so I'm here. Now, how am I going to show this? Oops. Okay. Yes, if I'm using this one, I'm going to be coming, trying to find you a nice view.
No, we're seeing it, Richard.
Right, so there's center. So I can use that and I can come up into here with this tool, and you can see how the point of the cut will move along the edge. And then to get into the corner, I can tilt the tool right on edge, only not with this tool, with my shear scraper. And Tomislav has just produced his, what do we decide to call it, his refiner.
Refiner, yeah.
You've just taken the corner out, and that allows you to get in under a little area like this. So I've got you can see that little kind of little recess just in under the rim. And that recess is really there so I can expand the jaws of the chuck into it if I want to turn the bottom off, which I didn't on this one. So that's that little one. So that's my general approach to doing the bowl. So I get down the first bit, find another bowl. So with doing this one, so I'll come. Yeah, so I'll come in with the gouge down to about there, and then thereafter it's the scraper. But I wouldn't risk, generally, I'd never risk coming up right up to the edge here with this tool. With this tool, yes, with this tool flat. Where are we?
Yeah, we could see it.
Yeah, so if you come up to there with the tool flat, that's just inviting a huge catch. So in which case I'd turn it on edge and do the shear scraping. And you'll see that in quite a few of the videos, I think.
That's due to the vibration at the end.
Due to the vibration, yeah.
Okay.
On the other hand, if you like heavy chatter marks, just get a tool like that and stick it in and you'll have some, if the bowl survives.
Thank you very much. That answered everything. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Everything, right, wonderful.
Okay, next up, Reinie's got another question. Go ahead, Reinie.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go
I
ahead.
can, yes,
Okay.
I need to because I can't see you. I could only see 5 of you. So.
Okay, Richard, if you're making something that is not motivated by sales, what do you get the most enjoyment out of making? Not necessarily on the lathe either.
Yes, I do still enjoy making. Yes, that's a difficult question. I do enjoy making bowls, I must say, and the sales is the bonus, really. So, yeah, most of the stuff I've kept here, I've enjoyed making. I think I don't have very much, which is really good because it all gets sold. Yeah, I found that a really difficult question to answer, I must say. I did enjoy making the boats. I think I enjoy whatever I'm doing at the time. That's probably it. Which isn't a very satisfactory answer, is it really?
Okay, all gone, bud.
Okay, next, Jim.
And so just thinking, going back on that other one, I did make a boat, which you'll find on my Facebook page, done about 3 years ago, or just before the pandemic, which was a proa. I was aiming to make it a sailing boat, but I got the balance wrong. But it was very nice to paddle. So that was a kind of what was it, nearly 12-foot little proa with an outrigger. I really enjoyed making that, and I look forward to making Mark II, which might happen this winter.
Okay, Jim Duxbury's got another question. Go ahead, Jim.
Well, first I have a comment on the bowl you have that's cut in half that has the rim undercut.
Yes.
On the edge. I have to tell you, I've used those and it's fabulous. That's a nut bowl. When you get a handful of nuts as you come out, they hook on that lip and they go right in your hand.
I'd never experienced that bit, but I'll bet that's
It's
good.
terrific. It's terrific for a nut bowl. Try it. You'll love it.
Right.
Right. My question was, you ever turn any of the other stuff like stools and lamps and furniture, any of that?
I've done I used to do quite a few spindles for a cabinet shop in Devon, shop fitters they were, and I used to do odd. I think there are a couple of candlesticks I made when I'd only been turning about a couple of years, and they're in Washington Cathedral. There's a pair of candlesticks there. But I had trouble keeping up with bowl orders most of my life. So in England, I used to supply David Miller's kitchen shops, and they had 3 initially, and then by the early 80s, they had 5 or 6. And they had these orders would come in 3 times a year, I think there were. And it would be 4 dozen 12 by 4s and maybe 80, or it was all in dozens. There'd be dozens of 6-inch bowls and scoops. I made a lot of these. These are 3-inch scoops, and there'd be those and the smaller ones. And there was a tremendous elation seeing an order like this, and then less elation when you saw delivery 6 weeks. And there'd be 3 of those in an envelope. So I was those orders had to be delivered not as whole orders. I used to do it bit by bit. And just so they had to have stuff on the shelves, and I had to have time to make them. And they were not interested in having anything which wasn't made by me. I did a batch of plates once, or sent them a batch of plates which had been made by the fellow really who I learnt by watching, and I thought they looked like my plates, but they knew the moment they saw the pile that they weren't, which was a lesson in itself. And so, yeah, I had big problems just kind of keeping up with that.
I think Ray Key talked about production turning, where you got the pile of blanks and you got paid for the good ones and had to pay for the ones you scrapped.
Yes.
Did you ever?
Well, that's about right. But you get very good at picking the right material. And I used to get my ash sawn in a local mill, and at that time in across England there were lots of little local sawmills, and they're employing half a dozen people, and that was all. So I could, when they had an ash which they thought would suit me, let me know, and I'd go down there on a Friday, usually at the end of the weekend, and at about 4 PM they would put through my log, and I'd have it cut 2 bowl sizes, so they would be cut to 12, 18 by 4s, 16 by 4s, and I used to do them in 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18-inch diameter blanks. And so the clean boards would be cut, and we'd cut free of all branches, knots and everything, so it's clean material. And I get that back and I just go down, cut the circles, rough turn them, and then they went up in a loft in a barn for a couple of years.
Do you specify then riv sawn or quarter sawn or?
Well, no, it was all no. We just went
board.
straight. I mean, you don't get trees generally which are big enough to go for all quarter sawn. You just ash is pretty stable, so there's very little movement with them. So that was good. I do rather wish I'd discovered or thought about tripod feet 50 years ago, because that would have saved a lot of time. I could have pushed the timber through a lot faster, and I'd have had the bowls, and rather like this one I showed you earlier on with the 3 little feet. And that's so I can complete those quite happily within a month from the tree being felled, and they're pretty stable, and I know they're not going to split or anything. Whereas the ones I was making, so this is a bowl from the about 1978, still made with screw, the 2 little screw holes there, made on a screw screw face plate.
Yeah.
And so that's olive ash, and that was very typical of what I was selling to David Miller.
Beautiful.
And nice bowl. And
Okay.
They buy those totally.
So that was very nice. And when I got to Australia, I found the sawmills just weren't doing that. They weren't prepared to saw wood like that. So I started getting different. I just had to approach everything differently, and I was mostly getting my own timber. So this is from that kind of a period. I bought this back secondhand for about $20 at the local market. So this is a piece of Tasmanian, what we call Tasmanian oak, which is a eucalypt, probably regnans, and that was a bowl. And somebody, I don't know why it got darker on the inside, but it's much darker. It's clearly been used quite heavily, and so I enjoyed making those, no end. Getting back to the earlier question. And of course, it's a nice utilitarian piece.
Okay, Rob Smith, you're up.
Yeah, Richard, is that like an Indy car on your desk there behind you?
Is that
Like an Indianapolis race car on your desk behind you?
an Indianapolis?
Yeah, turn around.
There's
No. Keep going.
Oh, this, right.
Yeah.
That's one of the four-ways projects.
Oh, okay.
So we did a motor car, yes. No, I did these for one of the project books. Or was it? No, Turning Toys. And they're actually, yes, coming back. These are great fun to make because they're turned on about 8 or 9 different axes. So they're quite slinky bodies, really, before they get kind of rusted up. Yes, I can recommend those if you fancy playing around with sense of turning. It's all measuring and so on, which I'm generally not very good at and not very accurate. But it's sort of one of those things where it's knowing when to stop, or when you might be able to do a bit later. There's a bit more, but there's a video on that. And we had to do something with wheels. Those of you who aren't familiar with the Four-Ways series, 4 of us, Mike Peace, Sam Angelo, and Tomislav Tomaszek, and myself, do a separate project.
There's a question coming up in regards to that. Adrian Cook is next. Go ahead, Adrian. Unmute and ask your question.
Yes, I haven't seen much of segment turning from you. Do you do segment turning, and what's your thoughts on it?
Well, I'm always amazed at people who do it. I'm not good at working that accurately, and it's not a good way to earn a living. I would suggest, especially outside the States. You know, you've got a rich, affluent market in the States where there are people who can afford those things, but you don't. There's not very much of it done in Australia or Britain, as far as I know. But the nearest I've got to it was to glue up some teak years ago for plate production, and my cabinet making friends were so rude about my joins that I thought, and I didn't really need to do it, so I just stuck to the bowls. But I think I would find it too time-consuming, requiring too much accuracy, probably. It's a whole different field. And and the good stuff. I don't know. I don't think I know of any professional doing. You're relying entirely on selling segmented work for a living. In fact, I can only think of one, and he was a production turner in New Zealand. When I first went to New Zealand, every little craft shop was filled with sovereign woodware, which was all glued up little bits of New Zealand timbers with the name printed on them, so you knew what you were getting. Absolutely amazing work, flawless. And I was once offered a guided tour of the factory, and the guy who was hosting me wouldn't take me there for whatever reasons. But it was the sovereign woodwork guy showed that it's possible to make these laminated up pieces inexpensively, because he was selling plates, and he did rulers and things like that, but they were all cheap. Just amazing how he did it. So but even that wasn't. Yes, it didn't really appeal to me. I think that's the bottom line. But how people get together these great big Mexican forms and get all the patterns in, it's I think astonishing.
Okay.
But not very commercial.
We've got a question there from Randy Hansen. Randy, you're next up.
Hi, Richard. Thanks for your videos. They're very educational. Really enjoy them. How did the four of you get together to form that collaboration with the Four-Way Project?
It was Tomislav's idea. He ran it past me, and I said, "Oh, that sounds like a good idea. Who have you got in mind?" And he had Sam, and I added Mike because Mike had been helping me get my YouTube channel going, and that was that.
Very good.
We discussed. I think that's the word I need. What we call ourselves, and once we'd settled on that, that was that. Away we went. So I think we've done 24 now. Yeah, 25. Well, 25 is coming up. You see that in about a week, 10 days.
Well, it's really enjoyable to see the four different ways that you guys can all approach a different project. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, that was the idea, and we were rather surprised that it hasn't produced a rash of other people doing the same thing. I've only seen there have been two groups doing the pile of boxes, the stacking boxes, which we did this month. But anyway, yeah, no, we look forward to seeing other versions of what we've got up to.
Thank you again.
Jim Duxbury's up again.
Yeah. You and I both started turning a long time ago.
Yeah, that was kind of cool.
That's before.
Talk to him and ask him a question.
Before bearing centers on the tailstock.
And I was actually prepared for.
Hang on, I've got two lots of sound coming through.
Hold on.
I can turn the fucking volume down.
Randy, mute yourself.
Randy, mute.
I got it.
You and I both started turning a long time ago before bearing tailstock centers. And I kind of liked it. I don't know, are there any advantages to that? Wait, you're muted too now. Wait, Richard, you're muted. Okay, somebody hit mute all or something.
Right. I don't know. Well, yeah, there are advantages and disadvantages with everything, I think. You certainly once when you're able to mount stuff quickly between centers and use jam chucks, it certainly opens up the you can really do whatever you like. It's just coming to terms with the techniques. Now, I've watched Hans Weisflog turn spheres, and Bill Jones too come to that, turn spheres in a chuck, and they are dead accurate. It's just wonderful to watch. And I don't think you could do it with any other way, really. All kinds of jigs and things like that, but they turn balls exactly the same size, or exactly the required size, and Bill Jones especially, doing it all the time, was just incredibly good at it.
That was mostly small
I was
stuff.
reading in the book of his, if you're cutting threads, after you've done half a gross, you begin to get quite good at it. and just he would make grosses of 144 or 200 or 300 draw knobs a day with threads. And I've got a little baby rattle he made, which is I watched him at a demo in England, and he didn't measure anything. He did it all by eye. And the threads are a bit loose, but when they're tightened up, the whole thing's tight and good. So if anything, when you're doing it all the time, you get very, very good at it.
I also noticed that he would, in his book, he would turn the female part, and he, like you say, he didn't measure anything, but then he had a hat full of male parts. And I kind of think if one didn't fit, you could maybe try another one.
Well, when you have that many failures, that is the case. Yes. Yeah. Yes, everything will find a mate eventually. So.
Yeah. That's another world.
Yes, it's. Yeah, but it's just I personally find production stuff quite satisfying. So it's I never understand why people have a problem with making 24 of something even, but little people who really can't cope with that. My approach is you only ever make one thing at a time. You just have to forget about the 50 you've just done and the 50 you're about to do. You're just doing that. And most people, I think, enjoy turning as much as anything for the shavings.
We get a lot of those. Well,
why are you bothering to make anything other than shavings?
I
Just
really,
get a rough bit of wood which turns well and get at it. No.
I used to really enjoy the dead tailstock before the bearing, and I still use it if I'm doing a lot of spindles because it's a dead solid. I don't turn the lathe off and you just crank them in and out.
Oh, no, I don't miss that at all.
You know,
I use it as a drive these days.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah.
No. Revolving tail centers, I do like those.
They're,
But I do very little spindle work, so it's just the odd tool handle, and that's about it. Yeah. Right. What else could we talk about? We can talk about bowl. Well, I had some bowl shapes here, which we could look at. Or anyway, what other questions have you got?
That's it as far as the questions are concerned. Boys or girls, we got 15 minutes yet. If you have any questions, it's cut in now.
Otherwise, I'll have to inflict designs on you.
Actually, I think designs would be a good idea. There's a lot of us that I mean, I get that question all the time. Why this shape or why that shape?
Yes. Well, my feeling, of course, is that people should be cutting bowls in half from time to time, especially the bad ones, which could be better, and also some good ones, so you find out why they're good. And if they're thick enough, you can then stick a back on them and hang them on the wall. I could even hang that on the wall, but this is what I regard as a good bowl. So when it sits on it, my little platform out. So when it sits on there, it could probably do without the foot, but I find commercially most people don't even notice whether it's got a little bead or foot or not. But it's quick enough to take off, as we've just discussed between centers. But typically, I've made bowls which come straight out of a chuck, right? And so that just speeds things up no end. And that was the wonderful thing about the new chucks coming along. Not all of them. There are still, well, in fact, an awful lot of the chucks don't have a jaw which allows you to grip that smaller foot, which I think is their loss. The other one, basic one I've got here is, this is the second or third bowl I made, which is, my mother used it for years, and I regard it as kind of harmless. It's not a particularly good bowl, but it's interesting. I find over the years, I'm not sure I can quite show it on the camera here, but I've looked at enough bowls now that I can tell pretty much by eye how thick it is, how far the center is above the surface it's sitting on. But that bowl is very similar to another one I did out of the same bit of wood, which is this one here, which is this shape. And this was originally made with, the way we made them was turning the outside, this little central recess was to go over a boss in the middle of the chuck of the faceplate when it was remounted. But this one I always regard as the kind of classic, not particularly good early bowl, because the curve, well, that isn't a curve, it's a shallow V. And it's one of those early bowls. This was made on screws, so they would have come in somewhere around there. and they would have been about 30 seconds below the surface, I think. So it was always very nerve-wracking making those. But it's one a classic early bowl where you've turned it, it's hollow, it's smooth, and you're just grateful to have completed it, and haven't paid too much attention to the rim other than just kind of rounded it over. And so with relief, you finish the bowl, get it on the screws, fill the screw holes, and take it to the admiring relatives generally. But I always hope to get away from that and try and get smoother curves. So a few bowls here. Yeah, so this one is quite a good example of bowl. If we were looking at it as a ceramic bowl, you'd say it had slumped. Potters would say this had slumped. So that's just a little bit kind of heavy there. It comes out a bit flat, and it would have been slightly better with a little bit steeper angle there. Perfectly functional. It worked really well. It's a nice bit of walnut. I don't know if I made it or somebody else, but it's a little bit thick just here. If we look on this side here, on the other side, I've just taken off, contrast it with my head. I've just marked the black there, which if I'd taken that out, that would have made the bowl, that would have been made for a much better bowl. Otherwise, not too bad. I always like to take the wall thickness down a bit just in there, so it just fits better into your hand. And well, this is like my big salad bowl I showed you earlier on. And so this was made again in the days of screws. And so when, come back a bit. Yeah, so this is a nice smooth curve all the way around. And when you grip it like that, it just fits nicely into your hand. I think one reason we like open bowls is that as you pick it off the table, it just fits nicely into your hand. Your thumb hooks over the edge. It just seems to be better than me. To me, I went through a period of thin and even walls. This was made in 1981, just before I left England. And you can see how thin it is because it's got holes in it. And this at the time was regarded as outrageously artistic. It was this was cutting edge stuff. It's amazing to think back now. It's a piece of elm, 10-inch diameter, 10x4, I think it is. And that would have been reverse chuck to get that to take the chuck marks off. That would have gone into a carrier. Any questions so far? Comments?
Jim Duxbury has another question.
Right.
On the utilitarian bowls and things, what do you sand down to? I'm sure you don't go to 3,000 grit or something.
I never sand anything down to that. No, I've generally 240 is enough, and very occasionally I might go to 320. But it's a thing I learned very early on is if you get them too smooth, people won't buy them because they don't want to ruin the finish on the bowl. So what's the point of making a utilitarian bowl if people aren't going to use it because of the finish? And I discovered that first with when I was making chopping boards. I think we've usually finished those to 120. With bowls so often, this one's a real classic, really, because it's a terrific bit of figure, and the Tasmanian blackwood. And I think most people would be afraid to use that, so they, afraid of messing it up. But I find, can eating out of this. It's got raspberry stains at the moment in it, that kind of pink. raspberry season at the moment. And I quite like discovering a nice pattern when I finish the food inside. Yeah. What else have I got? A little round one. I've got this little rounded kind of pot, which felt really nice. So it got cut in half. And again, I've tried to take some of the weight out here, but you do need a bit more weight in the bottom of a rounded thing. Otherwise, it's going to, not this shape, but if it was taller, it would just fall over. And if I want something like that, which doesn't wobble, I can always take out this, just reverse it and take out the bottom. It would have been reverse chucked anyway to take away the foot. That one probably, yeah, it's okay. It's kind of doesn't feel fantastic. It feels a bit kind of thick. Where are we? Yes, feels a bit kind of thick up where the bead is, but looks okay. Whereas this one feels a lot better for some reason. And don't have any others like that. No, I think that's that one. Here's a fairly kind of classic, heavy, fairly chunky bowl. This one isn't one of mine. It was given to me when I was writing Art of Turn Bowls, and so it's looks okay on the outside. It feels incredibly clunky. It's a bit of elm, and so on this one I've drawn what might be a better wall thickness for it. The other thing he had here, this was involved, it was an expanding collet, and it was asking an awful lot of the wood there with a bowl this size, I think. I always grip around rather than expand if I possibly can. Yeah, so that's where I'd be going with that one. And I thought I had one which was all nicely inked in. Oh, this is another one, kind of, again, it's a kind of pretty harmless bowl. Does functions all well, but inside it's just you can see where all the weight is, and it just doesn't. When I feel down in there, it just feels so thick. And this is a very common problem in the middle. If you're power sanding, it's very easy to take away a lot in the middle where you don't necessarily want it. So, whereas with hand sanding tends to build up a lump. But this would have been much nicer if you just kind of taken a bit out there. Yeah. And I don't think that, no, that wasn't me either. Whereas this one is, again, this is looks quite nice as a bowl. It was never sanded, just done as a demo. But when I cut it in half, there's more than there needs to be down in this area here. But again, that would function perfectly well as a bowl for centuries. Got enough wood there. What else have I got? I've got some bigger ones here. So this is, again, kind of half bowl, and rather lost it a little bit round here. This was cut in half because I was looking for half bowls for the Art of Turn Bowls, I think. I can't remember if it was that one or Turn Bowl Design. And we've got one here, which look a big kind of deep bowl, and on the inside it's got a rim, lip. And I felt here it would have been much better just if I'd thinned out the rim just there and probably cut in so it was just onto the top of the bead. But otherwise that's on the inside, not too bad. That was my only kind of feeling there. and it does feel a bit thicker than it needs to be there, but you don't want them too thin, because I remember once picking up a bowl with a very thin rim I'd done, and the long grain snapped off in my hand. So I learned not to do that. So a couple of other kind of things which can go wrong. This one's not too. That's an alarm for a pill. So this one got way too thin just there. And I thought it was commercially not viable, but in fact it's pretty strong, and I could probably have sold that and been all right. This one, another one, just gets a little bit kind of, looks okay there, but the rim again could have been better detailed in under here. So I've shown what I would do up here. Let's get it focusing. Yep. So I'd have just made that a little bit thinner, and could even have left a little bead or something up in there. But otherwise, that was at the bottom of that bowl, and that would have been gripped by the chuck. In fact, I know it was gripped by the chuck. I didn't take away the marks. Yeah, so there are just little teeth marks there. So that was slightly too big for the chuck. And here's another one, which was an extremely chunky bowl. I made this in order to show this kind of thing to it. So when I was turning this, I should really have cut away all the black stuff, and that would have looked a lot better. And I could have left a little bit more down here, and then I could carry that line straight onto the foot. That would have been a half decent bowl then.
All right. Okay.
Right. So.
All right. It's 9 o'clock. Richard, I want to thank you for doing this meeting with us. I know a lot of people are going to get a lot out of it. And again, like I say, I always refer to the newer members of the club that I started. I always refer your videos and Tomislav's videos.
Well, we both thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to get a hold of him one of these days, reach out to him, but
well,
again,
I know you'd be delighted to do it, but not at 7 in the evening your time. 2 in the morning for him.
Yeah, that's
Although
I'm
he'd
sure
probably do it for you.
I'm sure we could figure something out.
Yeah.
All right. Again, thank you for your time. And I was just looking up here on just a minute here. Don't go anywhere. On PayPal, I see you as Richard Raffin, Pty Limited. Is that correct?
That's the company, yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I found you.
But just Richard Raffin's fine. Yeah.
Okay. That's what I'll do.
Good.
All right, sir.
Ron, I hope it was useful.
Yeah. Yes.
Ron, how about if we unmute all and everybody can give a thank you if they wish?
Oh, we can do that. How do you do that?
Well, we can all unmute ourselves.
Okay, why don't we do that? Everybody unmute.
Thank you, Richard.
Thanks, Richard.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Richard. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Hooray.
Thanks, Richard.
Great job.
Thank you. Appreciate everything.
All right, sir. We had at one point we had up to 37 people. I would have hoped for a little bit bigger, but you know what? For the 2 hours, that worked out real well. So,
Good.
Okay, I'm going to send that to you. Please let me know when you get it.
I'll do all that. Right. Thank you, Ron. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Richard.
Bye.
Good thing.
All right, bye-bye.
All right, I'm going to end the meeting for everybody. I'll talk to you all later.
Nice job, Ron.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ron.
And